Yo, shalom, shalom. You are now tuned in to all that rah-rah with your Hebrew brother, Milo Judah. What it do? I am back. What it do, baby? But in all seriousness, brothers, this episode will be focused on the statements made by Mr. Jason Whitlock, the former host of Speak For Yourself. The brother used to work with Marcellus Wiley. I believe Emmanuel Acho was on the show as well when Mr. Whitlock was still there, but one of you brothers can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But Mr. Whitlock made some quote-unquote controversial statements about the condition of so-called black people and stated that, practically we live in a matriarchy and that the matriarchy, it doesn't produce strong so-called black boys, but rather effeminate so-called black boys who grow into effeminate so-called black men who cannot stand to be around each other. They show no compassion toward one another, right? And this isn't a bash women video or anything like that. Matter of fact, this video is honestly directed toward so-called black men because all my videos are directed towards so-called black men. I mean, you can walk down the street and see a so-called black man. He'll look you up and down, size you up, mug you. And all you have to do is say, hey, how you doing, brother? And you will scramble his computer. Because us as so-called black men, not all of us, but a lot of us, we look at another so-called black man as competition. We look at another so-called black man as our enemy, as a threat, instead of understanding that that is our brother from another mother, right? Or a distant cousin, however you want to say it. But we should be compassionate toward each other, right? And when the scriptures say, the man that was tender and delicate among you, it was saying that we treated each other with love. We showed love to one another. We were compassionate with one another. Of course, brothers had arguments, but if you love your neighbor as you love yourself, it's not really going to get past an argument, right? You're going to treat others how you want to be treated. But that's the problem with the so-called black man in this community. We don't know how to treat one another for the most part, unless it's our homeboys that we grew up with, right? Our day ones. This is something that's definitely plaguing our community, and the fact that the brother Jason Whitlock spoke on it and spoke some truth to it, that's going to come with backlash. But from what I've seen, the brother is standing 10 toes down on his statement. He's doubling down, and I'm pretty happy to see it. So with that being said, brothers, we're going to get to analyzing. Let's get it.
Young black men and their inability to treat each other in a humane way. Everybody involved in this on the street level was either 24 to 32 years old.
Right. So that's the issue. The brother Demetrius Haley is 30 years old. Desmond Mills was 32. Emmett Martin was 31. Justin Smith was 28. And Tadarius Bean was 24 years old. So all of these brothers are relatively young, right? But all of these brothers were born in the 90s. So I say that to say that seems to be the generation who is the most fatherless. Of course, there are generations prior and generations after who are fatherless as well. But the 90s, man, I was born in the 90s as well. And when I look to my left and look to my right, think about the brothers that I grew up with and how the majority of them did not live with their father. A lot of this stuff makes sense as to why this generation is so emotional. Because, you got to think. This is the generation where everything began to change as far as technology. This is the generation that has been dumbed down to believe that we are smarter than we are. So you have a lot of individuals, with college degrees and things of that nature, but they have low intellect. They're educated, can't take that from them, but their intellect is lacking. Their wisdom is lacking. And that's why they make emotional decisions. That's why they make life-altering decisions based off of temporary emotions. Right? Our generation seems to be the most impressionable, the most influenced, not influential, the most influenced. I mean, just look at the BBLs. It's ridiculous. And it's not even attractive. But that's besides the point. The point is, when you don't have a strong father figure in the house, you have young so-called black men looking for male energy, right? Whether it be in a gang, some brothers join the police force, you know, when they get a little older. But what they end up trying to do is trying to overcompensate for manhood, right? And individuals like that, once they receive some power and authority, they tend to abuse it, which manifests itself in situations like this, with the passing of the brother Tyree Nichols, you know, being beaten down by 5 so-called black police officers who were all 32 years old and younger.
Everybody. It was a group of young black men, 5-on-1.
I mean, look at how they whipping this man ass. And if you actually saw the body cam video, you know, you can hear the cop who has the body cam on, you know, telling the man to shut the fuck up. Watch out, y'all watch out, I'm about to baton the fuck out of him. And it's like, bro, that shit is so unnecessary, man. I mean, at the least, if the brother is resisting, you could have tackled the shit out of him. You know what I'm saying? And I don't have a problem with that. You could have tackled the shit out of him, let him know you're not bullshit. But the fact that y'all took it this far for a man who, from what I've seen, was not fighting back. He was honestly trying to understand what was going on. You know? Now, and you know, I will say this. That's another issue when it comes to so-called black men. We want authority, but we don't understand how to respect authority. Right? So when there is an authoritative figure, specifically a man, telling a so-called black man to do something, right? A lot of brothers who were raised with their mother, they don't take kind to another man telling them to do something. As to where, you know, in the scriptures it tells us to submit to one another. Right? Now the scriptures tells us not to allow a man to have power over you as well, but it does tell us to submit to one another as brothers. Right? So there's a difference between trying to lord over a man and, you know, being able to tell your brother, hey brother, I need you to do this for me when you get home. And likewise, if you love that man as you love yourself, the brother should be able to reciprocate that energy. So that's another issue with our community, and it's pretty nuanced because in one breath, we don't respect authority. But in the same breath, when we get authority, we feel as if we should be respected. And if we are not respected, then we abuse our authority. So that's something that has to be changed.
Look like gang violence to me.
The police is a gang, Mr. Whitlock.
It looked like what young black men do when they're supervised by a single black woman.
Oh, shit.
And that's what they got going on in the Memphis Police Department. They've elected or put some black woman in charge of the police force.
And by the way, the chief of the Memphis Police Department, her name is Sarah Lynn Davis.
And we're getting the same kind of chaos and disunity and violence that we see in a lot of these cities that are run by single mothers.
And what the brother is saying has a lot of credence to it. But these statements that he made are deemed controversial by who? The so-called black community. Why? Well, because it's the truth. And the truth hurts. The truth cuts like a double-edged sword. Now, I don't have a problem with single women. That's their prerogative. That's them. But to deny the fact that stats prove that children who come from single mother homes are usually the individuals to sexually assault someone. They have the highest percentage of males that are incarcerated, especially in the so-called black community. They're more likely to join a gang. And of course, with statistics coming out stating that the so-called black woman makes the least amount of money in America, that coincides with single mothers and poverty. So therefore, a lot of so-called black boys resort to selling drugs. So what does that mean? They are the ones tearing up the community. Which, I mean, the scriptures, that's what's so raw about the scriptures, man. That's why the scriptures tell us in Isaiah chapter 3, in the 12th verse, that the Most High's people are being oppressed by children, and women rule over his people. Now, of course, you have people who say, well, aren't the Most High's people the Israelites? Yes, they are. But the Most High deals with the man. The man deals with the woman. But the state that we are in right now, as the brother Jason Whitlock is pretty much pointing out, we are in a matriarchy. So that means things are upside down. The woman is on top of the man, which has our community in chaos. And when Mr. Whitlock referred to the chief, Saralyn Davis, stating that they have a black woman running the Memphis Police Department, he was pretty much stating that the men aren't going to respect her. And they are pretty much free to do as they please, as long as it doesn't come back too hard on the police department. They would rather have nothing blow back on them, but as long as it's something that, they can sweep under the rug. But in this case, this is too big. So, even as so-called black boys, around the time we start to hit puberty, the things that our mother tells us, as far as a disciplinary statement, it goes in one ear and out the other. Now imagine grown men, right? I mean, I have a video called Properly Vetting is Key. It's the 4th All That Rah-Rah episode, where a couple is in court. And the man, he was getting a little belligerent. And there's a man and his wife, they are the judges. And the wife, she kept telling the man who was getting belligerent that, if you continue to do this, I'm going to have to put you out. But she never putting the man out. It was just empty threats. So I'm saying that to say, men don't respect the authority of women. Now, of course, we know that we're supposed to honor our mothers. But as far as random women or your wife, and I'm not even saying don't listen to your wife, don't get it twisted. But, brothers, you're supposed to be the authoritative figure in your home. So even, relaying this back to our childhood, when you're a preteen or a teenager, it's only so much your mom can do to you. I mean, she can hit you, but it's like, that shit don't hurt. But you gonna whoop me? That shit ain't gonna hurt. You gonna cuss me out? Okay. You need a man in the home to instill a level of fear in a boy. Now, imagine that in the police department. You need a man in charge, not to necessarily instill a level of fear, but so there can be mutual respect as men. Period.
If we want to discuss the breakdown of family that leads to disrespect for authority, that causes you to resist the police and run from the police and not comply with the police because you resist authority at all times, because there was no male authority in your home, let's have that discussion.
And that's the statement that I made earlier, Mr. Whitlock. I agree with you that when there is no positive, authoritative male figure in the home, a boy isn't going to respect other authoritative male figures unless he has a quote-unquote father figure in his life, or a coach or something like that. But even still, coach isn't at home with him, right? So he's going to try coach as well, eventually. But that's the point. You don't grow up to respect authority. You don't grow up to respect other men. And therefore, you have unnecessary altercations because someone is trying to prove that they are more macho that they are more manly than the next man. In that case, you have these police officers trying to prove that they are more manly than Mr. Tyree Nichols, to the point where they took this man's life by beating him to death. And a lot of these women who were born in the 90s, and these young women who were born in the 2000s, and these girls who were born in the late 2000s, they are repeating the same pattern, as in having children without having an active father in the home. And they are bragging about it. They have a very braggadocious spirit. They are on social media, on YouTube, on TikTok, telling you how they are better off without a man, how them and their child are better off without a man. And for you brothers who have experience working in child protective services, then you would know that a lot of children, they don't know their birthdays, they don't know how to spell their names, they don't know the name of their elementary school. It's pretty wild. But those children are the children of the 90s babies, and even some 2000s babies. So therefore, so-called black man, it's up to you to choose a woman, first off, who is good for you. And that takes time, that takes vetting that woman. You shouldn't just be having children with women. You should have a child with a good woman, a woman that you can see yourself marrying, that you see yourself marrying, I should say. Period.
But that's not where they want to take us. Young black.
Now, we're going to shift our focus to a tweet by Mr. Bishop Talbert Swan in regards to Jason Whitlock's statements. All right, and I take issue with this tweet because woke so-called black people, they always talk all that rah-rah. You like that? But no, seriously, they always talk all that rah-rah about how so-called black people are superior to so-called white people, and how so-called black people other races, they are culture vultures, they steal our culture, yada, 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 and all these other races of people, they want to be like us, right? But in the same breath, they always put these other nations or other races on the same level as us. And what do I mean by that? By saying that these other nations or these other races are practically equal to us. But I don't see how you can say that when you're always comparing yourself to them. Right? So the tweet states, white boys go into churches, supermarkets, schools, malls, and nightclubs and violently murder innocent people. Jason Whitlock never blamed white women for this. Right? First off, why would he? Jason Whitlock is a so-called black man. What the fuck does Jason Whitlock have to do with a so-called white woman? Why would he? It makes no sense. But the point I'm getting at is, man, don't sit here and try to big up so-called black people and say we are this and we are that, and then in the same breath always compare yourself to someone you say that is lower than you, because that means you see them as your equal, you see them as your counterpart. We can't do the things that so-called white people do because this is their rulership. Period. And when the rulership flips, the so-called black man will be back in charge. But what the so-called black man needs to do right now is focus on himself, focus on his family, focus on his son, and of course keep the Most High first and keep his commandments. But this tweet goes into the broken mentality of a lot of so-called black people. This is it right here. You see it has 10.2 thousand likes, 2,508 retweets, 119 quote tweets. Right, and I'm pretty sure that number has increased since I screenshotted this image. So brothers, if you compare yourself to so-called white people, me and you don't have shit to talk about. Because I'm not going to be sitting here bragging about how much better I am than a so-called white man just to see him as my equal when it really boils down to it. I don't give a shit about what the so-called white man is doing. Don't give a shit about what the so-called white woman is doing. I don't care to critique the so-called white man's actions. I don't care. I critique the so-called black man because I am a so-called black man, and the so-called black man is the individual that I care about. That's the individual that I want to see on top. The so-called black man is who I want to see do better and be in a position of authority. Now, with that being said, so-called black man, we have to do better. We have to treat each other better. Right? I'm a firm believer in the notion that we should police ourselves. But if we have instances like these, how can we trust each other? And that's another major issue among so-called black people. We don't trust each other. But seeing something like this go viral, how could you? How could you? And especially if you're a man of wisdom, do you understand that most so-called black men, and this is no disrespect, but most so-called black men in this society are broken mentally. Therefore, these instances can occur, will occur, have occurred. And it's not just in the police force. It's not just in the police force. It's everywhere you look around. So our mentality has to be broken. Our mentality has to be elevated and recalibrated to the point where we see ourselves as individuals who can trust one another, as individuals who see the next man as a king, as a provider, who presides over his home, over his wife or his wives or his child or his children. And we have to respect each other. Point blank, period. So with all that being said, brothers, that's all that rah-rah. Yo.